1 year ago, Tony Pineda led UCLA to the top of the NCAA gymnastics world. The Bruins and Pineda are back, hoping to make it 2 in a row. In 1983, Scott Johnson led Nebraska to their 5th straight NCAA title. But now, after 3 straight second-place finishes, seniors Kevin Davis and Tom Schlesinger are still looking for their first championship. Welcome to Lincoln, Nebraska on a beautiful spring weekend. We're here at the Bob Devaney Sports Center on the campus of the University of Nebraska for the 1988 NCAA Men's Gymnastics Championships. And hello, everyone. I'm James Brown along with Peter Vidmar, double gold medalist from the 1984 U.S. Olympic team and 2-time NCAA all-around champion. And Peter, I'm reminded of this past college basketball season when it was the year of parity, and that term certainly seems to apply to the state of men's gymnastics.
It certainly does, JB. Of the 10 teams that are here, all of them had a chance to make it into the team finals. But the 3 that did had a special quality. The University of Nebraska is led with a 1-2 punch. Tom Schlesinger and Kevin Davis, both potential Olympians. Tom is the defending NCAA all-around champion, and he's always tough under pressure. Kevin Davis is certainly one of the best gymnasts on the United States national team today. Now, the University of Illinois is led by a junior, David Zeddes, who I think is probably the most improved and mature gymnast in the United States. UCLA has come on very strong recently, and they're very excited. They're breathing a sigh of relief because Tony Pineda is back after a season-long injury, and he can do some great routines, put together some big scores that might make the difference in the team victory. I really think that this competition will probably be the most exciting NCAA team competition in history, and I really think that the difference between first place and second place might be less than a point.
Peter, when most people think about gymnastics, they think about individual competition, but here today, it is truly a team event.
It is, and the emotions that I felt competing with my team, UCLA, a few years ago, is the same that I felt competing with the USA team in the Olympic Games. And for many of these gymnasts, this here is their Olympic Games.
All right, and here's how the event works. Each team will have 6 gymnasts perform on the floor exercise, pommel horse, still rings, vault, parallel bars, and high bar. The top 5 scores count toward the team total, and the team with the highest score after 6 events is our champion. And we'll be back with the competition in just a moment.
This special edition of CBS Sports Saturday is sponsored by Michelob. So exceptionally smooth, the night belongs to Michelob. Ryder, we're there at every turn. And by Speed Stick Deodorant, the wide stick gives you the edge. Speed Stick Deodorant by Menon.
LA's Chris Waller, the first performer. He'll be on the rings, a sophomore from Mount Prospect, Illinois.
And Chris has really come into his own, especially the last half of this season. Rings typically was one of his weaker events, but he's very strong on it now. That's a back roll to a cross. Right into a front lever, which is another strength skill. You have to do at least 3 strength skills now on rings, which is a new requirement. Kip to an L. Chris, being their leadoff man, has done very, very well because usually the first guy up tends to be the weakest, but Chris actually had the highest all-around score going into the team finals for UCLA.
And what might be the psychology starting one of the stronger guys first?
When you start a stronger guy first, you get a strong base score from which the rest of the scores can build, and that really helps in the team competition. Those are 2 great back giants, and now he's going to set up for his dismount. A double layout. Very good landing. That's going to get him off to a great start.
And a very appreciative Nebraska crowd here applauding the efforts of Chris Waller.
Now, Chris's mount is 2 strength parts right away. There's a back roll right to a cross. And then he's going to lower down to a skill called a front lever. So he gets the 2 strength parts right out of the way so he can move on to some of the swinging elements towards the end.
So the prospect from Illinois who got away, a solid 9.45 for Chris Waller. This is Patrick Kirksey, a 5'10", 160-pound sophomore for the Nebraska team and a big kid for gymnastics.
Yeah, he really is. He's a giant in our book. Most gymnasts tend to be a lot smaller, but he's very solid here. This is a double full punch front, kind of a new trend in gymnastics now. In fact, more Americans, I'd say, are doing those punch fronts out of back flips than any other country in international competition. And here's a handspring 1 3/4 dive roll. It's a very risky trick because you roll out of it. You don't land on your feet. And look at this. This is a round-off whip back, 2 flip-flops into a full and right into another one of those punch fronts.
From what you're seeing, Peter, does his big body size help or hurt him in the floor exercise?
Well, the good thing for Patrick is that most of that big body is just big muscles. He's very strong, he's powerful, and it helps him in tumbling. Now this is where everybody takes that little rest trick. It's a side scale or a Y scale. We tend to catch our breath at that point, get ready for that last tumbling pass. And a round off back handspring, double back. Oh, perfect landing. That's a great start.
And the Nebraska crowd agrees with you, Peter. A team that was shaking their first rotation in the preliminaries gets off to a fine start on the strength of Pat Kirksey's performance.
Here's that third tumbling pass. It's a round-off whip back, which is a back handspring with no hands. Then he does 2 back handsprings into a layout, full twist, and there's that punch front again.
And the sophomore from Tucker, Georgia, gets a 9-8 for Nebraska. Strong start. Tigran Mukchan of Illinois, a senior co-captain of this team, thankfully called Tico.
And I've known Tico since he was about 12 years old when he was a junior gymnast competing in the Los Angeles area. Here he walks all the way across the horse, moving up and down the pommels. And back more right to the center. And here's some of that flare work that's so popular now in pommel horse, right to a handstand. That was done very, very well. Drops down to scissors. And now some circles, getting ready for a dismount. A back travel across the horse, flare right up to a handstand. Tough routine.
Pretty easy to see why he was the 1986 Big Ten pommel horse champion. Very nicely done.
Now here's that handstand sequence. Going up to a handstand on pommel horse is a fairly recent trend, and Tico does it about as well as it can be done. I remember when he was a junior gymnast, he always had a good swing on pommel horse, but he could never keep his legs together, and he certainly fixed that now. This is a very good performance.
And the senior leads by example with a 9-7 score for Illinois. But it's Nebraska showing consistency throughout their lineup, taking the lead after 1 rotation. Lincoln, Nebraska for the NCAA Men's Gymnastics Championships, where even the young are happy with the Huskers' early lead after the first rotation. In this, the second rotation, the Huskers will be on pommel horse, Illinois the rings, and UCLA the floor exercise. This is Tony Pineda, who's been injury-plagued throughout his career. This year's been no different as he's trying to come back from a shoulder injury to help his team.
I wanted to come back to help him, but I couldn't because, I had to rest it. And even when I did, I had this insecurity about my shoulder because they told me not to go too hard because my biceps could have just snapped off. And, but it was great that I came back and started helping the team.
Well, Tony can't hold back on this first tumbling pass because he usually does a double layout. You got to go all out on this. And there it is. Perfect landing. What a great start. Now here's a second tumbling pass, a front flip step out right into another double tuck. Tony's looking really good.
He talked about concern over his biceps. Are they used a lot in the floor exercise?
Well, not too much. Now this is a little bit of a flare sequence and a little bit of breakdancing, bringing the street into the gym. But I wouldn't really say that it's going to be a big factor in floor exercise. It'll really bother him on rings and horizontal bar. Now so far Tony's gone all out. But what worries me is the last half because Tony hasn't been able to train, I'm sure, like he would have liked to. And floor is the most physically demanding event in gymnastics. Stamina is crucial. He's got to really be strong here at the end. There's that little rest trick again, a Y scale we call it. And his final pass, a double back. Ooh, he stumbled for it. Putting your hand down is a major deduction.
And Peter, it really does look like his shoulder is bothering him.
Yeah, and the only place that I can see where he could have hurt his shoulder is where he lifts for his double back flip or his double layout. Right here, he lifts his arms right there. You really have to throw your arms back, and that could have hurt.
So Tony Pineda, trying to be aggressive in the floor exercise, comes away with the so-so 9-3 score.
Yeah, and that's going to hurt him because they were counting on a big score from Tony.
This is Pat Kirksey. Ought to have confidence coming off of the floor exercise. He's on the pommel horse. Peter, what about his big body size on the pommel horse?
Well, that's going to be a little bit harder to handle because the pommels are quite narrow, and especially when you swing the lengthwise, which is what Patrick does a lot right here. Placing both hands on that pommel at that size is very difficult. Now he works across the horse. You have to cover all areas of the horse, and Patrick moves up and down the horse completely. Here's a little flare sequence into the scissor move, which is a required element. You don't have to do as many scissors as you used to on pommel horse now because it's kind of a boring skill, even though it is a requirement. That's a nice dismount. Legs together up to a handstand. Very, very tough at the end of a routine.
Well, Coach Francis Allen has to be pleased that he's going to have this young man back for a couple of years, only a sophomore.
Now, you have to move up and down the horse. Patrick moves across the pommels, doesn't touch the center of the horse, but then he comes down to the end, turns right back around, and here, as he moves across the horse, you watch, he's going to place his hands in the center of the horse, right there. That's very, very difficult.
So Pat Kirksey delivers yet another fine performance, a 9-7 score from Nebraska. Up next, teammate Kevin Davis, one of 2 seniors on this Huskers team, hoping to get the monkey of 3 second-place finishes off their backs.
I guess it could be a monkey on your back if you wanted to look at it like that. I don't see it in that light. It's a motivating factor for me. I look ahead. You know, this is my last year, my last shot. I think I'm going to go in and give it everything I have. But I don't look to the past with regret. You know, I think we've had some good meets. The NCAA's probably in the last 3 years have been more exciting than they've been in a long time. But it is a motivating factor for sure.
And this is where Kevin's really strong. Pommel horse is really one of his best events. He changed his routine at the American Cup and got a great score, and this new one's really exciting. I like it a lot. He starts with a flare, but puts his legs right together and walks across the horse. Exactly the same way that Patrick Kirksey did. Now here's his flare sequence. He does a flare and does a counter rotation going the opposite direction and moves across the horse. And the crowd loves it. And here's that required scissor sequence.
Very confident performer.
Oh, he is. He's very deliberate in all of his skills. Dismount right up to a handstand. That's going to score very high.
And amongst those cheering, the mother of Kevin Davis. You think she found any fault with that performance?
Of course not. She's a mother. She's going to give him a 10. But that was a great routine. I really like his flare sequence. This is it. See, while he's doing a flare in circle, he rotates in the opposite direction of that swing and moves right across the horse doing it. That's very, very difficult. Doesn't touch the pommels at all.
And the judges didn't find much fault with it either. A 9-9 score for Kevin Davis. This is David Zeddes, a junior on the Illinois squad, a team that comes into the competition as the #1 ranked team in the nation.
And largely because of Zeddes' performances. He's always been tough throughout the whole year, and he's really come into his zone just this past year. It's a back roll to a cross, back kip right up to a handstand. He's a really tough competitor. This is a very solid performance for him. Back up rise right to a handstand. See how the rings don't move at all. That's a trick that we'll see a lot of. It's called a Yamawaki, named after the Japanese gymnast that did it first. Goes into a whip it into an iron cross. Now he's going to press to a handstand and get ready for that dismount. Most of the gymnasts nowadays are dismounting with a double layout, and that's exactly what David does, and he lands it perfectly.
And that very solid dismount caps a clean routine for David Zeddes. Peter, how important are dismounts?
Well, the dismount difficulty is one factor, but the landing is almost critical. You just can't afford to give up any points. David does a double layout, and he zeroes in on the ground right there. And there's just no way for the judge to deduct.
Not much indeed, Peter. A 9-8 score for David Zeddes. However, it's Nebraska expanding its lead over Illinois and UCLA.
Oh, it hurts. It hurts. Can you... American Express? My daughter and I just had an accident.
Do you need a doctor?
I think she's got a broken wrist.
That was some trip. I'd like to keep this while you're away at school.